Today, we are going to be talking about Jingo. This mini-talking was suggested by Jalacy and local berry nose apologist on Patreon. This will be a quicker one, however, as Jingo only exists for 2 chapters. Really, if you don't remember Jingo, that's understandable, as she only appears in 1 book, and out of the things that the cats experience in said book, she's completely overshadowed. We're talking about Sunrise here. Yeah, the Hollyleaf book. Technically, she's also listed as a character in Hollyleaf's novella, but that's likely because that book copied its allegiances from Sunrise. Despite being outsiders, Jingo and her cats end up being treated with a little bit more respect than outside non-clan groups usually do. And obviously, this might just be because Jingo's group was especially helpful. They saved the traveling group from the dogs, they fed them, and they led them out of a very dangerous two-leg place. And by they, I mean mostly just Jingo herself. Jingo first shows up to stop Lionblaze from having a really cool scene where he fights a bunch of dogs by knocking over some trash cans. Said trash cans are described by the narration as shiny boulders, by the way. She leads the cornered warriors to an abandoned two-leg nest of some sort where she lives with several other cats. Also, by the way, some sort of beanbag chair or couch is described here as a squashy boulder. The word boulder is just getting a lot of mileage. Jingo tells everyone that they were gathered up by Soul and manipulated into doing work and hunting for him. Jingo speaks in defense of the time they spent living under Soul, but aside from a cat named Speckle who is seemingly in love with him, the rest don't see their time working for him favorably. Soul having random stray cats join him and work together in this two-leg den was apparently a big enough deal that it also attracted the attention of kitty pets with homes, which includes Jingo. He did various things for them, like set up systems for them to hide from the two-legs that might notice that they're in the abandoned house, but dogs eventually also found out where the cats were and started camping the house to kill cats and steal their food. One of the cats that was killed was a she-cat named Flower that Jingo had personally persuaded to come along with her when she moved there. A cat who would have been a safe kitty pet otherwise had Jingo not convinced her to leave. So Jingo seems pretty guilty about that. Soul spent time training the cats to fight, which according to one of them gave them little time to hunt, and set out on a plan to fight the dogs. Before that plan could properly be put into motion, the dogs killed a cat named Pepper, prompting the battle to start early and getting 2 more cats killed. Soul, meanwhile, had taken off back to the shelter, so when they got home and they were all ripped up, Soul was fine and making demands of them. So they asked him to leave, and he was like, "Okay, you'll be sorry." The cats who lived there regret that they did not beat him up anyway. Now everyone may be soul-free, but they are still being attacked by dogs. And that's their problem, because after this, the clan cats just kinda leave. Jingo leads them to where Purdy lives, which involves going across fences and rooftops, and also takes up most of her second and last chapter, and then they part ways. When the clan cats ask her why she doesn't just go back to her 2 legs, she says, "Because the other cats need me," Jingo replied. "Every cat needs a leader, someone to follow, someone to make the hard decisions. That's why we listen to Soul. But it's my job now. I can't leave them." When they say goodbye, Brambleclaw wistfully refers to her as Jingo Star. Not in any way she can hear, of course. Then we never hear about her or her cats again. How did they settle their dog problem? Maybe they never do. If they had just let Lionblaze fight 1,000,000 dogs with his superpower, they could have saved him, but as far as we know, Jingo and the cats in her group are still being hunted to this very day. Despite this whole situation being somewhere between annoying and depressing, I do like the 2 chapters, or at least I really like the first chapter, and the second chapter is mostly the cats bouncing around on rooftops. And they do give a lot more context on Soul, a big lazy cat who wants a bunch of people who will do stuff for him, a bit of a cult leader. A lot of the cats who lived with him just want him dead, wish they had beat him up, and so on. And Speckle is in love with him, although she seems to have a well-rounded understanding of who he is and his motivations. But Jingo seems more rational about it, more balanced. Probably because she's now in a leadership position herself and knows that some of what Soul was doing helped them, even if overall he was a manipulative jerk. Jingo is trying to manage a community, maybe in part out of guilt. To go back to her housefolk after getting her friend killed would have to contend with a lot of sunk cost. But also, Jingo seems to be the only one who's actually keeping things together, because despite everything, these cats are still living together, hunting and sharing, taking care of a queen like Speckle and her kids. But in weird fashion for warrior cats, their issues as a community are presented, and then left, forgotten, never revisited. The cats don't decide to help them with their dogs, they don't decide to help figure it out. Brambleclaw acknowledges Jingo as being on par with the warrior cat's leader, and then they leave. And culturally, it's not odd. Culturally, the clan cats aren't encouraged to help loners, kitty pets, or outsiders, but narratively, from examples we've been given in other books throughout the years, they really do usually help. Often, they'll go in and fix other groups' problems for them, usually by training them in the ways of a warrior or something. This happens with the tribe like 3 times for some reason, despite the tribe being a much older society. But at the same time, Soul already tried their default technique, the one where they train the kitty pets to fight so that they can solve their problem. And yes, obvious solution, Lion Blaze fights dogs. But you can't exactly introduce the go-to warrior cat's problem-solving technique when Soul already introduced it and failed. Additionally, the group is on a short mission, and the leadership does not know that Lion Blaze can totally beat 5 dogs. But they stand out as, the only group of cats that are treated sympathetically so easily, but also as a group of cats where the main characters don't take over their situation. But this is a story, seeing these cats struggling with the terror of maybe being torn up by dogs and it only serving as exposition for Soul's recent behavior, it's a bit disappointing. Even though they only exist for 2 chapters in one book, the reason that she sticks as a character more so than anything is that scene where Brambleclaw calls her Jingo Star. Because if you remember absolutely nothing else about the sequence, you remember that she got called Jingo Star. Although some people misremember her being renamed Jingo Star, and some people only refer to her as Jingo Star, which is a little bit strange when Brambleclaw never said Jingo Star to her face. And like I said before, this is an example where the warriors didn't walk in and go, "These people are godless and horrible. How can they live like this?" But the elephant in the room really is that these cats earned their respect by being clan-like, not through some other angle of respect. Of course the clan cats respect a group that are essentially living like they do with no obvious massive cultural changes. When they notice that Jingo's cats are sharing food, Lion Blaze muses that Soul wouldn't have taught them to do that. But at the same time, using information that we get later that may or may not be retcon adjacent, the way that these cats live could have been set up by Soul, and it could be assumed that the structure can be derived at least somewhat from his time living in SkyClan, even if he did stalk into ShadowClan and convince them to abandon the warrior code. Jingo is capable in both a physical and a leadership sense. She shows so much talent in jumping around and balancing on various things that it makes Hollyleaf feel a bit self-conscious. She also leads the cats through Two-Leg Place with plenty of specific instruction. And before Brambleclaw says anything, Hollyleaf compares her directly with a clan leader, but one with no deputy, no medicine cat, and no senior warriors for help. She considers every angle of a situation, snapping back at her friends when they suggest Soul's leadership was entirely rotten and not just rotten at the end. She gets solemn whenever talking about Soul's manipulation or personality, unlike her clanmates who get angry. Not including Speckle, who, despite knowing full well that Soul was taking advantage of them, actually I could go farther, probably knowing about as much about Soul's character and motivations as Erin Hunter herself, wishes to marry him. Speckle's I can fix him levels are unfortunately off the charts. But overall, despite her capability, the whole sequence tells us a lot more about who Soul is than who any of these cats are, which of course was the intention. But I do feel like there are interesting aspects about Jingo. She is, as the person who can keep calm in this situation, the one who has assumed a leadership role. She doesn't actually seem like she wants to be here or in charge. It is duty, responsibility, and guilt that is keeping her here taking care of these cats. Not unqualified, but also cannot leave. How is Jingo doing? We'll never know. 2 chapters of her in the entire series, and one was mostly just filled with parkour scenes. Hold on, we're about to get through an entire mini-talking and I never put a tinfoil hat on and started blabbering about something I made up. Okay, so look at this. Jingo, when describing Flower, says, "the beautiful young she-cat." She says beautiful. She goes out of her way to call her beautiful. So, Flower and Jingo were in love? That's all I have to say. Goodbye.